lecture, which is on what? Well, the next chapter, that being chapter 12. Okay. Cross-cultural exchanges on the Silk Road. So if you're like, what happened to the Roman Empire? You kind of left us hanging there during the Pax Romana. Yeah, the Pax Romana, 27 BCE until 180 of the Common Era. That's 200 years or so. Things go downhill after that. So the Great Settlement by Augustus only lasts for 200 years. And before I kind of say that, thank you, Ani, for that interruption. Before I say that, kind of with a little bit of sarcasm, keep in mind the United States did not have 200 years of internal peace, right? With a civil war, not that far into the Republic. So we'll talk about the decline of the Roman Empire today. Also, Han China. These are two major empires existing at the same time, right? At different ends of the Silk Road. Cultural connection. This chapter deals with transnational history. So we're not just looking at Rome within its borders. We're looking at the connection between Rome, Han China. Remember, Han Chinese will last until 220 of the Common Era, and the peoples in between who were interlopers. Okay, they were people who helped to diffuse Roman culture eastward and Asian culture westward, especially along the Silk Roads. As we're kind of seeing today with the current novel coronavirus pandemic, it's a pandemic, right? It started, as far as we know at this point, in Wuhan, China, and it spread from there. And now, here we are in Chautauqua County dealing with the repercussions. It will probably get worse before they get better. So just your public service announcement, take it seriously. Most of my viewing audience is pretty young and feel like they're invulnerable. Well, keep this serious, okay, folks? Stay inside. Don't cough on people. Don't sneeze on people. Keep your hands out of your eyes and your nose and your mouth. Sanitize where you've been. You can pick this up from a surface. They're saying it can last up to 3 days on hard surfaces like stainless steel. Stay inside. I mean, there's great YouTube videos here to watch, and you can watch them again and again and again until we kind of, what they say, flatten the curve. We can't have all people sick at the same time. Our medical facilities will be overrun. Still, a lot of people might get sick, but if they have to get sick, we want that to happen over a longer period of time so we're not overwhelmed, okay? And although it's seemingly less virulent for young people, that's young people without pre-existing medical conditions. Folks with diabetes, with asthma, heavy smokers, probably vapors, are more susceptible to this and bad outcomes. And certainly none of us want to carry this on to someone else who might be older and have an underlying condition and make them very, very sick. So stay cool, watch these videos, learn something, all right? So cultural connection. What I wanted to say is, as goods move across borders, so do ideas, with goods, ideas, and diseases, okay? So the Roman Empire in the 3rd century will suffer from really pandemic disease, okay? Pandemic disease of unknown origin. I didn't mean to do that, sorry. Let's go back, too fast there. So cultural connection is increased by the 1st century of the Common Era, that's 2,000 years ago. Classical societies controlled vast areas, so they actually start to bump up against one another. We have Rome bumping into the Persian Empire, the Sassanid Persians, and then the Parthians, and then bumping almost into the kingdoms of northern India, almost bumping into China. So you're not crossing many borders anymore. These large societies are butting up against one another. There are also nomadic people, especially to the north, on the move, the so-called barbarians, the Germanic peoples, who will come into Rome and actually overtake the western half of the Roman Empire. We also have people in, what's today more northern China, the Yurkin people, for example, horseback riding people, who are on the move, and they're also carriers of culture and goods and, yes, disease. Right? So much of the Eastern Hemisphere, the side of the planet most of you are not sitting on, unless for some reason you're watching this in Europe, Africa, or Asia, much of that Eastern Hemisphere was connected through trade networks, which again spread stuff, commodities, beliefs, and disease. And this integration globally, after 1492, really globally, right, is still with us today as we're realizing with this global outbreak. Trade networks of the Hellenistic era preceded Rome. Okay, even Cyrus the Great had been constructing roads in the Persian Empire 2,500 years ago, right? So the roads, the Roman roads, sea lanes are going to connect east and west. Keep in mind, we don't mean North, Central, or South America yet. Okay, this is just the Eurasian continent. Large states share borders, we said. Alexander and Seleucus, yes, they connected India to the Mediterranean. The Ptolemies, there's that hard to spell PT, right? The rulers of Egypt, one of the descendants of the Alexander's general, sea lanes to India. So India is being connected, and what's being traded? Spices, gems, slaves, and silk going one way. Actually, I should say it this way. Yeah, the silk's coming from Asia, especially into Rome. What's going from Rome in that direction? Wine, olive oil, and money, which is another way of saying silver at the time. Right? Here's some of the sea lanes. So we've talked about the Silk Roads. They're not just roads, these are waterways, okay, connecting east, this side of the map, with west, Rome over, actually here off our map. Roads as well, we've got the Taklamakan Desert, so he who enters does not leave desert, that you want to go north or south of that, that's a very dangerous place to be. So cultures are connected. What's moving along these Silk Roads? Well, Buddhism. Really? The Romans became Buddhist? No, it didn't really spread that far west as far as we know. But it does spread, as we've noted already, from India through East Asia, right? Ashoka, ruler of India, remember, he converted to Buddhism. He sponsored missionary activity over the Himalaya mountains and across the plateau of Tibet and into China. Bactria, which would have been Afghanistan at the time, and Ceylon through India. Okay? Merchants carried Buddhism. So it wasn't just monks carrying Buddhism. Merchants also carried it, okay? Along the Silk Roads. And in an age of political breakdown, right, China had broken into 3 kingdoms by the 400s. People look for meaning in life, right? If Buddhism is there, people might turn to Buddhism, especially Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism was the greater vehicle, the more flexible one, the one that kind of picked up, or in a sense kind of absorbed ideas from Tibet, absorbed ideas from China like Taoism, absorbed ideas as it moved eastward. Okay, so we get a very different, one could say more flexible or open or tolerant Buddhism by the time we get to Japan than we did when it left India, especially if it goes over land. Okay? Southeast Asia connected with sea lanes as well. Okay? So here's the Wheel of Life, Samsara in Buddhism. Here's a probably difficult to see image of Ganesha. That's not an image from 2,000 years ago, but here we have a human figure with the characteristics of an elephant. Ganesha, one of the probably most beloved Hindu deities, right? Spread of Hinduism also, right? Ganesha is not a Buddhist deity. Ganesha is a Hindu god, also spread eastward. Okay, sea lanes to Southeast Asia. So we'll get to the map in a moment, but Hinduism and Buddhism are spreading especially eastward from India into Southeast Asia and into China. Along with the Indian culture, the rulers of Southeast Asia, what we now call Cambodia, were pre-literate. They're trying to put together a kingdom, the Khmers, Khmer, and what do you need to put together a kingdom? You need a bureaucracy, which means writing, okay? As Hindu Indian merchants end up in Southeast Asia, they had writing. They might be trading spice, but they knew how to write. And the rulers of the Khmer Empire said, stay here. Okay? We need your writing. We'll take the Hinduism along with it. We'll build temples. We get this great Angkor Wat, all right, Temple to Vishnu. Just an amazing, really full campus temple. I was there years ago. It was, in a sense, kind of, I don't want to say lost to history, because there were actually Buddhist monks living there a couple hundred years ago, but it was all kind of overgrown. That Tomb Raider movie or video game, right? If you've seen that, that was actually based on Angkor Wat. There's other temples there. It was all overgrown when the French kind of, I should say, kind of rediscovered it. Although again, people were in the area were living there, but the French kind of began to clear all of it. And today you can see some amazing images of Angkor Wat. This Temple of Vishnu, a Hindu god. There are also places like Angkor Thom and others that the Khmer built in honor of the Buddha. Oh, you can be Buddhist and Hindu? Yes. Most Hindus and Buddhists will say, yes, it's okay. The Buddha sometimes is seen as one of the gods of Hinduism. So these are not necessarily mutually exclusive as people in the Western tradition might view religion. Malay Peninsula. So where are we talking about? Well, let's get back to a map. Okay. So Hinduism is spreading this way. Hinduism does not make much of an inroad going over the Himalayas through Tibet. It's more or less, I'm a Hindu Indian merchant, I'm on a boat, and I'm going over here to the Khmer Empire, maybe the Malay Peninsula, and bringing my religion with me. Likewise, Buddhist monks or Buddhist merchants could make that same voyage. When they did, Buddhism doesn't change much. If you're a Buddhist and you get on a boat here, and you're over here 3 weeks later, your beliefs didn't change. Probably, unless you had a really bad experience, right? But if you're a Buddhist monk or merchant going this way, it's a long, elevated climb over the Himalayas, right? You might not make it, but your students make it the next leg, and their students, and their students, and their students. And over time, you're picking up Tibetan practices, some Taoist ideas from China, etc. As Mahayana Buddhism spread in this direction, and the more strict, one could say more original version of Buddhism, Theravada, spread this way, along with Hinduism. In fact, today, this archipelago here, this chain of islands here, Indonesia, some of the islands are mostly Hindu, like Bali, okay, which is a place you Australians like to go for holidays, right? Not in the era of COVID, though. So we have the spread of Buddhism and Hinduism, mostly eastward, the spread of Christianity, mostly westward, okay, through the Roman Empire. There was persecution on again, off again, intermittent. That's kind of like my windshield wipers. Sometimes persecution, sometimes not. I went to parochial school as a kid, and they kind of made us think Christians were always being fed to the lions, which was a good story, but rationally, how could there have been anyone left, right? It would have all been killed. So some Roman emperors persecuted Christians as a foreign religion, especially if things went bad in Rome. They blamed the Christians. They were a scapegoat. They were a subcaste, right? A subgroup. It was kind of on and off again. Generally, the Romans had learned to be rather tolerant toward cultural differences. I mean, that's the only way to run an empire. Right? You can't make everyone believe exactly what you believe, right? So it's better to live and let live as long as people pay their taxes and follow the laws, which sometimes the Christians or the Jews did not do, as we learned last time. Christianity spread on the roads and on the sea lanes through a kind of a postal system, right? Much of the Christian New Testament is comprised of letters written by followers of Jesus, not always the direct followers, right? So the letters of Peter might not be from Peter, but one of Peter's students or grand students. Letters of Paul might have come from Paul, or maybe one of Paul's own disciples. But keep in mind, Paul had never met Jesus, right? Paul, as we learned in the video last time, watch it again, was a Pharisee, was a judge of the Jewish religion, and wanted to stamp out this heresy. And to be fair to Paul, in the Jewish tradition, it seemed like when they went away from their teachings, they were punished by God. And the Pharisees wanted to make sure that didn't happen, right? We have to stay true to our faith and follow every letter of the law. And, who's this guy causing trouble? And his followers are causing trouble. We got to stamp this out because God might punish us. That was the thinking of the Pharisees, right? So the Pharisees, in the Christian tradition, get this bad rap, but they were trying to uphold what they believed in. I mean, not to defend the violence that they might have undertaken. Paul experiences this conversion right on the road to Damascus and becomes a very prolific, a lot of writing, and intrepid, right, traveling all over the place, disciple of Jesus. Right? So a lot of the letters, the epistles, they're so long we call them epistles, right, of the New Testament are by Paul to new Christian communities, right? Christian communities within the Roman Empire. Like, how do you start a church? What do you do? And Paul had some good advice. And he also had some advice that was very characteristic of his zeitgeist, right? The time in which he lived, which was Rome, and 2,000 years ago, very patriarchal society. So he might say things like, women should be quiet in church. Things that don't adhere to the Me Too era. Okay, so Paul, give Paul a break. He was writing 2,000 years ago. He's arrested as Roman citizen. He's brought back to Rome. He's shipwrecked. There's all types of great adventures about Paul. In your spare time, now you're stuck at home, read about Paul a little bit. But it really helps to bring Christianity to people who weren't Jewish. Brings them to the people of Rome, the so-called Gentiles. So missionaries like Paul and others on the roads and on the sea lanes, those famous Roman roads, spreads within the west, right? Spreads westward within the empire. also North Africa, and goes southward along the Nile, which is actually upward, or up the Nile. I don't have my maps there today, as I would in class, but just think southward along the Nile. So Christianity will take a root in East Africa, right? And a kingdom that will eventually be called Ethiopia will be Christian, right? All through the Middle Ages, right? From like 500 to 1500, Ethiopia will be Christian, but it'll take on a different characteristic. In some ways, it's like the acorn that fell off the tree and rolled away a little bit. They'll develop some of their own practices called monophysitism, which you can Google sometime if you want, but different than the practices that grow from Rome itself. Right? So we'll have Christianity, which means literacy, in East Africa through the Middle Ages, at least among the upper classes there, the ruling class of Ethiopia. Early Christianity lacks standardization. Can women speak in church? Can they not speak in church? Can priests be married? Yes. Can priests be married? No. Can priests have children? Yes. Can priests have children? No. Was Jesus God on earth? No. Was Jesus God on earth? Yes. I was confused, right? There are a lot of different beliefs within Christianity. It was highly diverse. Kind of like if we take an hourglass shape, it was very diverse. In time, it'll become conformist, especially as the Roman men get in charge and kind of stamp out what they didn't like. And then today it's kind of like hourglass again, right? It's very diverse. So you get Christians of many different interpretations. Right? One of the diverse practices would have been in Southwest Asia. Where's that? The Middle East. Back to the map. How about a new map, John? Yes, this map would even be better, right? So in Southwest Asia, and actually in Egypt, Christianity became very ascetic. Think John the Baptist, right? Living out there eating locusts and wearing camel hair, going naked, right? People who were dissatisfied with society, especially men, took on kind of a hermetical, hermit-style monasticism. I'm getting away from society. You're all corrupt. I'm just going to go live in the desert, right? They became monks who often lived alone or even in small groups. Well, in the warm climate of Egypt and the Southwest Asia, which erroneously we now call the Middle East, right? In this region, you could do that. You might be able to live alone without a lot of clothes. But try doing that up here in the primal growth forests of Central Europe. Something's going to eat you, right? So there's going to be a different type of monasticism or monk-style life for men and for women within the Roman Empire itself. So what else are we missing here? Rise of monasticism, there's the word. Monasticism in the West. So what are monks and nuns? These are people who took on a religious vocation or religious life. Typically, they weren't the people in the churches delivering the Mass, delivering the sermon, the homily in the Christian and the Catholic tradition. By the way, these are all Catholics, okay? Catholics means universal. There's no Protestant church yet. If you want to get to Protestantism, if you're Lutheran or Episcopalian or Presbyterian, come back next semester, okay? We don't get to those split-offs, those kind of splits, those bifurcations of Christianity until after 1500. So come back for History 1520 if you want to learn about the Protestant branches of Christianity. Right now we're talking about kind of the roots in the early seedling coming especially out of Rome. Okay? It does make it to Rome. According to tradition, Peter, really Jesus' best friend, makes it to Rome. That's probably not true, not to get anyone mad at me. Look, that's a Catholic tradition, right? And Peter becomes the first bishop of Rome. In other words, the first pope. And like the Roman Empire, the church official sitting in Rome claims more power, right? It has kind of these tentacles of power going out through the empire, just like the government did itself, right? So in many ways, the church came to mimic the structure of the government. You have an emperor, you have a pope. You have different districts, prefectures. At the local level, the parish, you've got these local officials, right? So the church is going to borrow. Of course, it makes sense. That was working for them. It's going to borrow the kind of organizational chart of the Roman government. Okay, so we make it from Rome, and then pushing into the Iberian Peninsula, we'll call it Spain then, but Iberian Peninsula, and what we would now call France, Gaul, right? The church is pushing in that direction because missionaries are going out to the non-Romans, the so-called non-literate people, the barbarian, and working to convert them, okay? And maybe building kind of residence halls in the first growth forests of these lands, like big log cabins, where they would devote much of their time to prayer, into going to mass, to going to church service together, into growing food together and raising animals together and eventually making wine together, okay? So this was a communal lifestyle for men or for women. Once in a while they had mixed houses and those didn't work out so well, at least for the whole rule called celibacy that we'll get to in a moment. In this map, if you can see it, right? If you can't, I'll just do it with my hand. We have Christianity emanating from Palestine, especially westward, also eastward for a time. We get some different interpretations of Christianity called Nestorianism, for example. These will largely be replaced in time by Islam. We're not yet to the Islamic faith. We're not yet to Islam. Okay? In red here, without even looking at the key, I know it's Buddhism moving up into Persia. Yeah, and especially up into Afghanistan. All right. Prior to 2001, when the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, there were major Buddhist monuments. And these were like carvings in the side of a mountain, 4 stories tall. And the radical Islamists there blew them up, right? These are kind of World Heritage Sites. So Afghanistan was at one time Buddhist. Oh, it's right here. Here we have the Mahayana branch spreading northward, the more Theravada strict branch getting on a boat and going across the Bay of Bengal, more strict, so to speak. And in purple, this would be Hinduism. Hinduism does not, I don't know why, frankly. Okay, someone maybe can put in the comments why. Hinduism does not have much luck going over the Himalayas and beyond. I think part of it was Hinduism did not engage in a lot of proselytization, and that's just a big word for trying to convince others to join your faith, right? So how did Hinduism spread? A Hindu merchant gets on a boat, or maybe a whole bunch of Hindu merchants, and they know they're going to be over here dealing in spice for a long time. They bring a Hindu priest with them, right? And then if you're over here dealing in spice, you're like, oh, you guys are praying, what are you praying? And oh, I'll become Hindu too. So it's not really an attempt like Christians or Buddhists would have to convince others to join the faith, right? So it's more, in some ways, a matter of business, okay? Or if you're the Khmer rulers, a matter of becoming literate by welcoming in these Hindu Sanskrit writing merchants and priests. So Buddhism is more missionary driven, like try to convert people, so too is Christianity. Okay, there's this thread of belief. Now the bad stuff that we're kind of dealing with right now, right? We live in a global age. This wasn't quite global, but it was transcontinental, okay? Spread of epidemic diseases. You get Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism on these routes. Well, like that's all good, I guess. But you also get pathogens, especially smallpox, which has been eradicated. If we think COVID-19 is bad, just be really thankful we don't have a smallpox pandemic. The last case of smallpox, I believe, people can now fact check me. This is interesting. You can watch this again and again and fact check it and find that I'm wrong. In fact, I was wrong in the first triumvirate last time, but nobody noticed. I Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, and I said someone else. Who cares, right? I think the last case of smallpox in the world was in the 1970s. It's been eradicated. So most of you watching this, especially my on-campus students who tend to be younger, don't have a scar in your left shoulder, you weren't vaccinated against it. But older students, adult students, maybe your grandparents might have a little scar in their arm. That was from smallpox vaccination when they were children to eradicate that disease. And we've been successful, right? So healthcare, science, got rid of smallpox, which has been the great killer through human history. Okay? This will be the disease that next semester, if you come back, and hopefully it's in person, post-1492, just devastated Native American peoples who encountered it as a novel fashion for the first time. Right? So smallpox will take a major toll on the Roman Empire and hit a China that had already fallen from the Han Dynasty. So major toll, hurt empires, people that lack of immunity. In fact, you and I don't have any immunity to smallpox now, so let's hope it doesn't escape from whatever laboratories it's frozen in and end up in wider society. I have heard that some of you who are military veterans actually have been vaccinated for smallpox. which is really kind of scary. Well, I mean, we don't want our frontline military personnel succumbing to smallpox in the event of biowarfare, right? The rest of the history teachers, who cares, right? Rome in the 3rd century. So 3rd century means 200s, right? Population's in decline. Oh my God, right? 25 to 30%. Cities are hurt the most. Yeah. So what are you seeing with COVID-19 right now? New York City, as of when I'm speaking here, and this is Happy St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. Might go into what are we calling it now? A lockdown for 14 days because it's really rampant in big cities. Yes, people are congested. People are close together, okay, in close proximity. I'm standing here in DeWittville, New York. I got 2 dogs with me right now, so probably I'm safe. I'm not gonna be arrogant about that. But cities are hurt the worst, usually in pandemics. In the modern age, on the other hand, that's also where our medical facilities tend to be located, right? So not so much in the Roman era. People did not know what was causing disease. And in fact, we think it's smallpox, right? We're not even sure. Because people in this era did not know the cause of disease. They did not know how it spread. You and I can kind of hunker down for a while, flatten the curve, and not let it spread. These people didn't know what was causing it. Okay? So cities hurt the most. China gets hit a little bit later, really high mortality rates, but it's after the Han Empire had already fallen and broken into three kingdoms. Consequences, well, when the Roman emperor dies of plague, I mean, that's pretty devastating, right? When your soldiers, especially your frontline soldiers who are living in congested barracks are dying of plague, that's going to bring change to your society. When the